everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to go through a really quick, really chic, adorable pouch that is not like any pouch you've probably made before. Today we'll be making the Plover pouch, and this pattern comes to us from Noodlehead. Now this is such an adorable pouch. It's really fun to make, very beginner friendly, and one of those patterns that you can really play around with your materials. You can pretty much use whatever you want with this pouch. This pouch comes in 3 sizes. This is the small, and I've already made the large as well. You can see here's the difference. In today's tutorial we're going to be making the medium. Now this pouch has a front panel, a back panel, side panels, which work as the gusset, and then a base panel. So you have lots of fun areas here for color blocking. Think if you used a different color, like a solid color on each one of these panels, I think that would be so cute and perfect for summer. The zipper is probably one of the coolest details. It does overextend the top just like this, kind of like little dog ears, but we're actually using these little fashion snaps to snap it down to the side. Now I would say the fashion snaps are totally optional. If you don't have metal fashion snaps, if you just don't want to use them, you could just leave this as is. It still looks really cute with your little, like I said, like dog ears. They just kind of dangle to the side. On the inside of this bag, for the small one, we have just a little mesh pocket. All the pockets are optional, so if you just want to make a pouch with no pockets, that's fine. I, however, love these little mesh pockets, so this is a split 2Z mesh pocket, and on the other side there's nothing. When we look at the large and the medium, we have the same configuration. We have a large front and back panel. This would be really great too for embroidery, or for if you have like those letter patches, you can iron them on. You can have a lot of fun with this big space. We also have the side panels, the bottom panel, the overextending zipper, but then you see on the large and the small, we have the option for a zipper panel, and I'll be using a zipper accent for these because it's just fun to do, but you do still have the mesh pocket as well. Now I would say, depending on the side, this is a very scrappy project. I will be actually using scraps from previous projects in today's tutorial, and I think you can really use whatever you want. For this first bag here, I used a bonded nylon for the exterior, a glitter jelly vinyl for the sides, and then for the lining, I used a water-resistant canvas. No stabilizer, no interfacing. I'm not using that on any of the bags today. For this version here, I used a medium to lightweight vinyl, a metallic vinyl that is a little bit firmer, and then for the inside of this one, I actually used the bonded nylon. So you see this is the same type of material. It's different print, but the same type of material. You can use this nylon for linings as well as exteriors. Again, no stabilizer, no interfacing. I would also say this is a great beginner project, especially if you've never worked with curves before, or if you've never worked with a zipper gusset, and that's kind of the fun thing. It has like a mini zipper gusset. You see, if we flatten this out, you have that flat zipper gusset where it extends on both sides. This is a method we use a lot, especially with bigger bags where we have a lower inset zipper, but we don't want the ends of the zipper to be in the seams. We make little zipper gussets like this, so if you've never done something like that, I feel like this is a great way to practice. So thank you so much to Noodlehead as always for allowing me to use your patterns on the channel. If you haven't checked out their site, I would be surprised. I think most people have made a Noodlehead bag at some point in their bag making journey, but I would love for you to go check out their site. If there's a pattern on there that you haven't seen on the channel and you'd like me to feature it, please leave a comment down below and I'll put it on the list. I do have a few more Noodlehead patterns coming, and there are new ones out all the time, so I'm very excited to do more of their patterns. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. This is gonna be a pretty quick tutorial today, which I think we needed. We've had a lot of very long tutorials lately. I think we need a little palette cleanser, kind of, you know, fun mojo fix bag. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm gonna be making the medium size today. So I need about a fat quarter of exterior material and a fat quarter of accent material. This is all gonna go on the exterior though. So this quilted nylon material, which is like my favorite thing ever. It has like a whooshy feel, almost like, you know, like think of like those like old school sports jackets, you know, you remember from like the 90s. It has a light batting on it. It's not dense, it's really easy to sew through, and it's very, very resistant because it is the nylon material, so easy to keep clean. I'll be using that for the main like front and back panels, but then for the accents, so the gusset and the side and stuff and a couple details on the inside, I'll be using this vinyl. And then for the lining, you're gonna want about a ½ yard of material. I will be using this nylon material. Now this was part of a subscription box, but this is material you can easily get on Wonderground Fabric, so I'll have a link down below for, I think I can link all 3 of these things, but this is a really nice, this is not like the bonded nylon, it doesn't have a fluffy back. Honestly, it's one of those materials that you could use either side as the right side. So if you had a project that did not have lining and your exterior material was also going to be the lining material, this is a great option for that. So here's some other items we'll be using today. I have my metal bag tag as always. I'm gonna have 2 sets of fashion snaps. So these are snaps that are metal snaps. They are not plastic snaps. You need 2 sets because you're gonna snap them on both sides. Then I have a small amount of mesh and a small cut of fold over elastic. This is totally optional. It's just a really cute mesh pocket on the inside of the bag. You could also use your lining material and just double the size of this, fold it over and create a slip pocket like that without the mesh or the fold over elastic. It's very simple to do. And then I have 2 zippers. Now the pattern is written considering metal zippers, and metal zippers are designed a little bit differently than our zipper by the yard tape that we use, where these are not metal teeth, they are plastic teeth. We can sew over them. Metal zippers, they're going to have a little bit of extra length on the sides, so the final size of a metal zipper is going to be different than what we want. So for example, for this size medium, it calls for a 12-inch zipper. Now, do not cut your zipper tape to 12 inches long. That's not going to be long enough. I recommend adding 3 inches to it. So my long zipper tape here, which goes on the top of the bag, is 15 inches. And then for the interior zipper pocket, it calls for a 6-inch zipper, but that's gonna be the finished size of our zipper opening. That's not how, we want the zipper to be longer than that. So I'm cutting my zipper 8 inches long. So for the medium, I added 3 inches to the main zipper, so it's 15 inches. And then for the small one, I made it 8 inches. Okay, here's all my tools that I'll be using today. Lots of plastic clips as always, a pair of snips, and a stiletto. These are things I keep at the sewing machine with me at all times. I always like to have 1/8 of an inch wide and 1/4 inch wide double-sided tape. I don't love sewing over double-sided tape, so if I feel like I have a 1/4 inch wide seam allowance, like my zipper, I'm gonna use the skinnier double-sided tape to help with that. I have my rivet press and die set for the fashion snaps. I'm not adding any rivets today, but I can install those metal fashion snaps using the die set and my rivet press. I have a hole punch to go with that as well. A 1 inch by 6 inch ruler as always. I have some Beacon 3-in-1 glue. This is really just for my metal bag tag. Also for my metal bag tag, I have a scrap piece of stabilizer here to help adhere it so it doesn't rip the material. I have a couple different marking tools I've been really enjoying lately. This is a new one in our shop. This is a 3-in-1 pencil, mechanical pencil, and it has an eraser, which I just realized earlier today. But it has colors black, white, and pink all already in it, which is really helpful when you're marking on different colors of material. And then I have a water erasing marker. An air erasing marker is also really helpful. I might be using one of those as well. Then I have a lighter to clean up any loose ends, a seam ripper as always, and then a little bit of tape. This also goes with the bag tag. This is just like duct tape that I put on the back. I'll show you. I forgot to share with you the thread I'll be using today. I'm going to use a Tex 45 weight thread from Wizardry Stitchery called Dusty Rose for the top thread. This is going to go through the needle. In the bobbin, I'm using a lighter weight thread. This is a Mara 70. I could also use a Mara 100. Either one of those will be fine in the bobbin. Just this Tex 45 weight. It's a little thick for my bobbin. It doesn't love it. I don't need any more headaches. And then the needle I'll be using is a Microtex 8012. So let's go through our pattern pieces. First, we have the main panel pattern piece. You're gonna have 2 cuts of your exterior. So that's that super fun pre-quilted bonded nylon. I still just love that. I love not having to do that quilting. That would take me forever. And then 2 cuts of my lining material, which is that beautiful nylon. You're gonna use this same pattern piece to help you decide the size of your mesh pocket. I will tell you, I just cut my mesh as a rectangle and making sure it is tall enough. I just have a straight edge on the top and that it is tall enough and wide enough. And then I cut it down after I sew it on. I don't pre-cut my mesh to this size because mesh can be a little tricky to work with. It can be kind of, stretchy. So I just wait till it's sewn on and then I cut it down. Next we have the side panels. You're gonna have 2 cuts of your accent side panel. I'm gonna use that vinyl for this, and then 2 cuts of your lining. And then the base panel, you're gonna have 1 cut of your accent or exterior and 1 cut of your lining. Next we have the zipper panel. This is going to stick up on the top of the bag. You can use an accent material or exterior or even lining for this. It's a fun little detail. I'm going to use my exterior. I have 2 cuts of that. And then for the zipper end tabs, I'm going to mix this up a little bit. These are each 3 inches by 1.5 inches. So I'm just going to use vinyl. I'm not going to fold in the edges. I'm going to leave the edges raw. If you have a vinyl or raw edge material, you're more than welcome to do this. If you're using like a quill cotton or something, you're going to need to use the pattern piece and you're going to need to fold it down per the pattern, but I'll show you how I work with this. And then for the zipper pocket, I'm gonna mix it up a little bit. I love using zipper accents. They're a lot easier for me than cutting the rectangle in the panel and then folding the little edges back. Especially with this nylon material, this is gonna be much, much easier. So I'm using the squared 6-inch template. This does have paper backing on the back because I didn't wanna mess it up for the shop, but you would normally remove the paper backing and you can see through it. So if you have a detailed vinyl, you can do pattern placement really nicely. Since it's a plain vinyl, I don't need that, but I have one cut of my vinyl, anything that can have raw edges, and if you wanna edge coat this, you can do that. I'm not going to. And then one cut of my lining material for the zipper. This is optional. You do not have to include the zipper if you don't want to. So let's start by building our zipper. I'm gonna make this very easy for me. So I'm gonna take my long zipper tape. For me, I'm doing the medium, and this zipper tape is 15 inches long. And then I have my zipper tabs. On the back of my zipper tabs, I measured in from the short edge and marked a midpoint line. So this is gonna be, for my zipper tabs, this is gonna be 1.5 inches in from each short edge because my zipper tabs are vinyl and they're 3 inches by 1.5 inch. So then I'm gonna grab just 2 small pieces of double-sided tape and I'm going to add them parallel to that marked line, not reaching the edges of my vinyl because I don't really wanna sew over this tape. I just wanna use it to hold the zipper in place. So I'm just gonna do this on one side of each of these tabs. Okay, so then I'm gonna take one end of my zipper tape and I'm going to remove the paper from those 2 little pieces of double-sided tape. I'm gonna take my zipper tab and lay it wrong side up. Zipper is right side up. If you haven't already done this, make sure you grab a lighter and you melt down the edges of your zipper tape so it doesn't fray. And then I'm gonna lay my zipper right side up and the teeth are gonna meet up with that midpoint line, and I'm gonna make sure that my sides of my zipper tape have enough space on each side where it's even. So I'm centering this. So my zipper tab is wider than my zipper tape, which is what I want. So you see I have a little bit on the top and the bottom. There we go. Then I'm gonna grab another piece of zipper tape and I'm going to add it just right over the teeth within that tab area. So not extending beneath it. And then I'll remove the paper from that tape and then fold over that tab edge and wrap it around the zipper end. So try to make sure that the 2 short edges of your zipper tab meet one another. I'm gonna grab some clips and clip this in place. And just make sure the sides are even and the 2 short edges meet up on the bottom, which is a little difficult because you can't quite see both sides. Just do your best. Repeat that with the other side in your other zipper tab. So now once these are clipped in place, I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch along all 4 edges of each tab at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Go slow going over those teeth. You might want to back stitch over the teeth as well. When I go over the short parts towards the inner part of the zipper, I do a generous 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to make sure I catch the back side as well. And there we go. And if you're using vinyl like I am and you want to edge coat the sides or anything, which is pretty much just painting them, you can do that. I'm going to leave them as is. Edge coating is something I highly suggest. It just takes more time. So you can set this to the side now. So now grab your 2 zipper panels and flip them to the wrong side, and along the short edges, mark in 1/2 of an inch and draw a vertical line that's parallel with each short edge. And then what I did is I grabbed my 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape, so the skinny one, and I put a line of double-sided tape just outside, closer to the edge of each one of those marked lines. We're gonna fold these edges in by 1/4 of an inch, and this is just kind of an easy way to do that. If you have material you can iron, you can also go that route. I like to use tape for this, so I'm just going to fold this back. Now this nylon I'm using, it's layered, so I will also have to use clips because there is that batting layer in between the front and back layer. It's like a little quilt, so I'm going to use clips to help with this as well. But if you're using just like a regular bonded nylon or vinyl or anything like that, you can just use the tape. Okay, it's gonna be a little tricky with the clips, so I'm gonna have to remove them for the next step. But what you're gonna do is you're going to cut these in half lengthwise. So you're going to take your zipper panel here and you're gonna fold it in half and you're gonna cut right along that fold. You could also use a ruler and measure this if you prefer, which is probably what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use a ruler and a rotary cutter and just measure the height, divide it by 2 and cut that. Okay, now once you have your 4 units ready to go, you can fold them in half and find the midpoint along each long edge. You really only need it on a couple of them, but I'm just gonna do it on all 4 of them. I'm gonna find the midpoint and I'm gonna use my chalk pencil here And I'm just gonna mark the midpoint on each of the long edges. Now grab your zipper tape and you wanna mark the midpoint on your zipper tape as well. So I'm just gonna fold this in half and I'm gonna use my water erasing marker for that. And I'm only doing it right along the edge, and I'm gonna do it on the front and the back of both sides, just so I can see it everywhere. Okay, so I'm gonna take one of my zipper panel units and I'm going to grab some double-sided tape, and I'm going to lay my skinny 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape right along the top edge of this zipper panel carefully. I'm just doing it end to end. Remember, the short edges are folded back already, so I don't have to worry about those. And then I'm gonna remove the paper from my tape. And I'm gonna use the midpoint on my zipper panel and the midpoint on my zipper tape. And I'm gonna lay my zipper tape right side up, zipper panel right side up, matching up the midpoints. I'm gonna stick the zipper tape to it. Okay, now I'm gonna grab another one of my zipper panels. And once again, I'm going to grab the skinny 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape, and I'm going to line it up with one of the long edges of my zipper panel, keeping the short edges folded back. And then I'll remove the paper from that double-sided tape. And I'm gonna lay this panel right side down, so it's right sides together with my zipper tape, once again matching up the midpoint marks and also matching up the corners with the other panel that's already taped in place. So I have my two zipper panels with the zipper sandwiched in between. Now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch along this edge where the tape is at 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I should not be sewing over my tape. Back stitching at the beginning and the end, only sewing where the zipper panels are, and make sure those short folded edges stay folded in on themselves. So after you have it stitched on, what I'm gonna do now, just to help me with this next step, is I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of double-sided tape right along the edge of my material, because I am using that quilted nylon. It wants to move around, and for the next step I really need this stuff to stay in place. So I'm going to just I'm adding the tape right over the raw edge, so it's holding that fold down for me, so I don't have to worry about it becoming unfolded. And then we're gonna pull these two zipper panels back, wrong sides together, and match up their midpoints along their long raw edges first. So start at the middle and kind of press and work your way side to side, pulling these wrong sides together. And then once we get close to the edge here, I'm gonna take the paper off the tape and I'm gonna pull the other folded edge back and line it up fold to fold and corner to corner. It's okay if the corner bit here is a little bit messy, because that's going to be eaten up in the seam. But this flat edge over here and by the zipper tape, that's going to be seen in the end. So try to get that as neat as possible, using tape and clips or iron, whatever you need. So do this for the other side as well. Okay, so once you have this nice and flattened out, we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along all the edges by the zipper and the raw edge and the short edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I suggest starting and stopping on the raw edge side, back stitching at the beginning and the end. All right, this is looking good. This is gonna be cute. I'm excited about these colors. So now we're gonna repeat that on the other side. I'll walk you through it since I'm gonna do it anyways. So I'm gonna grab one of my zipper panels just like I did before, and I'm gonna grab my skinny double-sided tape, because again, trying not to sew over this. And I'm going to add this along one long edge right on the edge of my zipper panel. Do this for my other zipper panel as well. And if you have a directional print you're using for this piece, just make sure you think about what's gonna go where, right? The edge that you're adding the double-sided tape to, that's the edge that's gonna go up against the zipper teeth. So if you have a certain look, think about it. So I'm gonna take one of my zipper panels and lay it right side up, removing the paper from the tape. And then I'll take my zipper and lay my zipper right side up, and using the midpoint mark on the zipper panel and the midpoint mark on my zipper tape, I'm gonna line those up. And I'm just gonna stick this down, and after I have it stuck down, I wanna make sure the sides line up. So I'm gonna flip this over, and with the folded edges in, good. I wanna make sure the folded edges of the panel I'm attaching right now match up with the folded edges of the panels I've already attached, right? We want this all to be centered. So that looks good. And if you don't want to use double-sided tape, you prefer to baste this down, you can do that. So right now, instead of adding the second panel, just take this to the sewing machine and baste along that edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Same thing. If you just don't want to use the tape, that's totally fine. So I'm gonna grab my other zipper panel, I'm gonna lay it right side down, matching it up corner to corner with the zipper panel already attached on the other side. And then I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine. I'm gonna carefully just stitch along the edge only where the zipper panels are. Don't overextend it beyond that. At a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. And once again, only because of the material I'm using. I don't normally add this little piece of tape with just regular bonded nylon or vinyl, but because this is a layered material, and I just wanted to see what it would be like using this type of material on a project like this. But only because of this material, I'm gonna add a little piece of tape here just to hold it back. There we go. And then I'm gonna pull these two zipper panels wrong sides together, matching up their midpoints first. And luckily, even with the bigger sizes, these panels are so small, it's gonna be easy to line everything up. So I'm just going to pull the raw edges together. I'm gonna take off that paper from the double-sided tape and pull these folded edges back, making sure the folds stay folded and they're corner to corner, and just clip those together. And now with this nice and flat, I'm gonna take it to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch along all the edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting and stopping on the raw edge side, keeping the side folds tucked in nice and neat, back stitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, your zipper is all prepped. You can set this to the side now. So now let's work on this mesh pocket, which is completely optional. Like I said, my mesh is cut as a rectangle, just making sure it's as big as I'm going to want it. My mesh is actually quite a bit bigger than it needs to be. It's a lot taller, but that's okay. It was a scrap. So I'm gonna grab my fold over elastic and I'm gonna decide which side I want to be the outside. There's a shiny side and a matte side. I'm gonna have the shiny side be the back. So I'm gonna attach some double-sided tape right along the center of one of the halves. So between that fold over midpoint line I can see and the raw edge. And this just is, it makes it easier for me to attach this, but it is optional. You don't have to use tape for this. You can just use clips. I'll be using both. So I'm going to pull the paper off the double-sided tape, and then with it tape side up, I'm gonna grab my mesh and I'm just gonna lay it right over the tape. You can see I usually have my elastic a little bit longer than it needs to be. The pattern does suggest you actually make the elastic a little bit shorter than it needs to be, so it's like a nice stretchy tight fit. That's totally fine too. And then all I have to do is fold this elastic top over and it will actually just stick to that double-sided tape through the mesh, which I find pretty handy. All right, so now that's stuck on. I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine. I'm gonna top stitch along the bottom edge where the raw part of the fold over elastic is at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can backstitch at the beginning and the end, but we are going to trim it down. So now I'm going to grab one of my lining main panels and I'm going to grab the pattern piece and I'm going to, actually I don't even have to fold it. I'm just going to line it up on one side of the lining panel, and the pattern piece has a dash line for where the top of the mesh pocket's going to go. So I'm just going to use that dash line to mark on the side where that top's going to go. I'm gonna flip this over and I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, so on the left side. So once I have those little marks on the side, then I can grab my elastic pocket and I'm just going to make sure the elastic top edge meets up with those marks. And that's it. And then also making sure it covers the bottom and the sides. Unless you cut your mesh pocket down to size, then you should just make sure it perfectly fits over the bottom. But if you're a little lazy like I am, this works too. Again, I'm just working with a scrap piece of mesh here. I'm not gonna do anything with this smaller cut. So now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to baste along the sides and the bottom, holding this mesh pocket into place. I'm gonna baste at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once the mesh pocket is basted in place, now I'm gonna flip this over so I'm looking at the back of the lining panel, and I'm just gonna trim down all that mesh so it's the same size. The thing I like about mesh pockets is that if they're a little wonky, it's totally fine. If they're a little bit loose, if they're a little bit tight, it does not matter because they don't need to lie flat. They're gonna look good either way. They're meant to be, you know, 3-dimensional pockets, not flush pockets. So you can be pretty sloppy with these and they still turn out looking very good. So now I marked a midpoint on the top and the bottom of my lining panel, and I used those marks in a ruler to draw a midpoint line going right down the center of this mesh pocket. I'm using an air erasing marker for that. I'm gonna go to the sewing machine and I'm just gonna start at the bottom and I'm gonna top stitch right up that line and then right back down it to separate this into 2 pockets. You can also leave it as one if you would prefer that. So now your mesh pocket panel is done. You can set this to the side. So now I'm gonna do the zipper pocket and I'm gonna do it a little bit differently from the pattern just because I am lazy. So I have my zipper cut out here, and I have the midpoint marked on the top and the bottom edges of my main lining panel, and I'm gonna mark the midpoint on the top edge of my cutout as well, but just with something temporary. So for me, it's gonna be an air erasing marker. Now I put some double-sided tape on the back of my zipper cutout along both long edges. So now I measured 1 inch down from the top edge of my lining panel, and I lined up my midpoint mark on the top edge of my accent with that midpoint mark there. So it's 1 inch down. And then I'm using the double-sided tape to just stick this in place so I don't have to worry about it moving around on me. And now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch along the outside of this, not the inner rectangle inside, only the outside of the zipper accent. I'm gonna top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm gonna leave the threads from the bobbin and the top thread nice and long and just pull them all on the back and tie them off into a nice clean knot. So now I'm gonna grab my zipper for this pocket and I'm going to get all the frayed bits off the ends. And then I'm gonna grab some double-sided tape and just lay the double-sided tape along both long edges on the right side of my zipper. Now you can use 1/4 inch double-sided tape here or 1/8 of an inch. I like to use 1/8 of an inch just because it's less likely I'll have to worry about it. And then before we attach the zipper, you need to get this material out of the window. So cut into that opening inside your zipper accent. And I'm gonna cut my material out of that window. So I just start by cutting down the center, past the edge. Make sure you don't cut your zipper accent on accident. And we're just going to cut the material out of this window. So pull it up, pull it back, and cut it. It's okay if it's sloppy, it's not gonna be seen in the end. We just don't want any of this in that opening. So you see how that looks on the back? I can clearly see the back of my zipper accent, and on the front, I can't see anything in there. So I'm gonna grab my zipper, lay my zipper right side up, zipper closing towards the left. I'm gonna take the paper off one edge of my zipper tape, just like that. And I'm going to center this window over the zipper tape. So lift up the sides, make sure it has the same amount of overhang on both sides. Okay, once you're happy with the placement, you can pull your zipper pull into that window and then take the paper off the other double-sided tape and then just press this lining panel back down, pressing the zipper into place, just like that. Okay, now this is a little bit different than how I normally do it, but take your lining panel for your zipper pocket and lay it right side up, and then grab another piece of double-sided tape, and we're gonna lay it right along this top edge, one of the short edges. And then you're gonna flip your lining panel with the zipper taped on upside down. So you're looking at the back side of the zipper, and then remove the paper from your double-sided tape on your zipper lining panel. And you're gonna flip the zipper panel right side down, upside down. So it's extending off the top, and you're going to line it up with the bottom edge of your zipper tape. So I know this is a lot of the same color on each other, but I have the bottom edge lined up with the bottom of my zipper tape, just like this, and the zipper panel extending towards the top. So then I'm gonna take this and flip it right side up, and we're gonna go to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch along only the bottom edge of this inner rectangle window. And we're gonna make sure we offset by about 1/8 of an inch on each side, which means I'm gonna start 1/8 of an inch off from the short edge, and then I'm just gonna top stitch along this bottom edge and then end 1/8 of an inch off the other short edge. So it extends just slightly. It doesn't have to be perfect, just a little bit. I'm going to leave the tails long, just like I did on the outside of the zipper accent, and I'm going to pull them to the back and knot them off. But we're only doing the bottom edge right now. We're not doing the sides or the top yet, just the bottom edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have that bottom top stitched on, if you want to put another layer of double-sided tape just underneath that stitching on the back side here to hold the pocket pressed firmer, you can. I'm gonna leave it, I'm just gonna press it with my fingers. So I'm just gonna pull that zipper pocket down and give it a good press with my fingers. It's easier to do if you shut the zipper. Just get it nice and flat, there we go. So now, I'm gonna work with the bottom edge here of my zipper panel, and I'm looking at the right side of this zipper pocket panel. I'm gonna put another piece of double-sided tape on this edge now. And then I'm gonna remove the paper from the double-sided tape. And then I'm gonna fold the zipper lining pocket panel up so that short edge with the tape on it is gonna line up with the top edge of my zipper tape. So just the zipper tape, and make sure the sides are lining up with the sides that are already stitched down. So again, this is a method that doesn't have to be super perfect. It can be kind of sloppy on the back here and you're never gonna know. So you see now I have this little like basket here. So I'm gonna flip this back over to the right side, and with that zipper panel fold down behind the lining, not hanging above, I'm now gonna go and top stitch along the sides and the top edge of that rectangle window using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure that I'm starting and stopping by connecting the stitches that I've already made on that bottom line. And just like I did with that bottom row of stitching, I'm going to pull the bobbin and top threads to the back side here and just knot them off. You just want to make sure you do enough knots and they're very tight. And if you're worried about the security of those knots as well, you can add a little bit of glue over them, or even tape. But sometimes I'll use my Beacon 3-in-1 glue, and I'll just put a dab of glue over those knots to really hold them in place. Okay, so just about done. So now what we want to do is we want to flatten out this pocket on the back really well, because we need to close the sides. So just press it with an iron if you'd like, or you can use your hands and just finger press it. And then you're going to flip this to the right side of your lining pocket and pull your lining up and away. And if you have the double-sided tape on your zipper like I do, you might want to pull that up and off of it while we're stitching, because man, that stuff likes to stick to my presser foot. So now we're going to sew along each of these edges anywhere between a 3/8 to a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance, whatever you're comfortable with. Even a 1/4 inch is fine. Just make sure you're catching the zipper, if your zipper is wide like mine is, back stitch at the beginning and the end on the top and bottom of each side. And look at that. Easy peasy pocket. Isn't it cute? And it looks like it was a lot harder than it was. So this lining panel is done. You can set it to the side. Now let's work on the gusset. So take your base panel, lay it right side up. Take your side panel, and we're working with the exterior material. Take your side panel and lay it right side down, lining up the bottom edge of your side panel with the short edge of your base, right sides together. Now we're going to sew along the short clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Now I'm going to top stitch that after I do the next step. So I'm just going to pull that side panel out of the way, and I'm going to take my remaining side panel and lay it right sides together with the other short edge of the base and clip these right sides together, and then stitch along this short edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Now I'm just going to snip these corners down at a 45-degree angle. This is optional, but I find it helps reduce the bulk whenever I'm sewing this later, especially if you're using a thicker material. So now we're going to press the seam behind the side panel. So just push it. If you can iron your material, go for it. If you're going to finger press, go for it. If you want to use a little metal roller, I'll show you that. Like, this is really popular. It's a seam roller. It's great for vinyl, faux leather, cork, things like that. Things you can't iron. It's just heavy, and it allows you to put pressure on the seams to flatten them out. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to top stitch along the side panel edge where the seam is behind the side panel. I'm going to top stitch on each side panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I am going to back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have the side panel done, you're going to find the midpoint by just folding it in half end to end. The seams should also match up, and then just pinch along the base panel and use a marking tool or scissors and mark the midpoint on the base. All right, so once you have the exterior gusset done, you're gonna grab your lining gusset pieces and you're gonna do the exact same thing. You're gonna build it exactly the same way as you built the exterior. The seam allowance is the same, the top stitching is the same. So I'm gonna do all that off camera and I'll meet you back. Okay, so now you should have your exterior and your lining gussets. You can set these to the side for just a moment. I have one more thing to do before we put it all together. So now I'm going to attach my metal bag tag to one of my exterior panels. And to do this, I just found the midpoint mark on the bottom of my main panel and measured 2 inches up for the center. And then I used my washer to mark placement for where I need to cut so the prongs of my bag tag can go through the material. I'm going to mark those same placement pieces on a piece of Decoville Light. I'm going to switch this over to the black marking pencil. And then I'm going to grab my seam ripper and very, very carefully I'm going to rip along those marked lines. It's actually even better if it's a smaller cut than those marked lines. You don't want it to be too big. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the Decoville. And I'm just going to insert this first to make sure it looks good before I start gluing everything. Yes. Isn't that pretty? I love the way gold pops on black material like that. So now I'm going to put some Beacon 3-in-1 glue on the back of my metal tag. I find that this just helps it kind of survive longer. In case they get snagged or anything, it's more likely to stay put. So I'm once again going to push the prongs through those slits, push this in, flip over my panel, I'm gonna add my Decovil Light over the prongs, and then I'm gonna add the washer, and I'm gonna push the prongs in on themselves. I'll flip this over and make sure it's straight before my glue dries. That looks great. Flip it back over. Then I'm gonna grab my, whatever this is, my small duct tape. And I'm just gonna put this right over those metal bits so that doesn't rub against the lining. And there we go. Now my front panel is all ready to go. So grab your front and back main exterior panels and grab your gusset exterior, and we're going to start building the exterior of the bag. So I'm going to start with my front panel laying right side up, then I'm going to take my gusset and lay it right side down. Midpoints are marked everywhere. I'm going to match up the midpoint marks on the bottom of my main panel with the side of my gusset, clip those together first. Then I'm going to go to the top left corner and pull the main panel and gusset corner to corner and clip at that corner. And then I'm going to repeat this for the right side top corner. And then I like to flip this over and start working from the back of the main panel. So I'm just going to start with the straight edge first, which is not much straight edge. It's all pretty curvy. But I'm going to clip along the straight edge on the side and the straight edge on the bottom. And then we're going to focus on these curves. And see, the material I'm using, it's kind of smushy, so I actually can get away with a lot here. But if you notice that your material on the main panel is like bubbling and rippling, then it's because the gusset needs to spread around it, which it should need to spread. So I'm going to grab some scissors and very, very carefully, I'm going to cut into the gusset only, not the main panel. And I'm going to do like 3 or 4 cuts. Trying not to cut my main panel. Quilted stuff wants to get in the way. So I'm going to do it around the seam between the side panels and the base panel too. So I'm going to repeat this on the other corner. And now I'm going to flip this so I'm looking at the gusset wrong side up, and I'm going to sew along the sides and the corners at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and the end. Keep scissors next to you at the sewing machine. If you need to cut into the gusset some more so it can spread, go ahead and do that. Don't make it too difficult. I like to use a zipper foot when going around curves like this. Okay, once you have that done, go ahead and just take a look at your corners. Now, since my front panel is not really thick, my corners are actually gonna do pretty good. If your material is all really thick, that's the lining, if the front panel and the gusset is both like a heavy vinyl, then you're going to want to do a second row of stitching just outside that first row, especially around those corners, or else once you pop it out, those stitches are going to be seen in the end. So when you pull this out like this, you're going to be able to see the thread from the stitching. So just do a second row of stitching just outside of it, and that will take care of that problem. So I'm going to clean up these edges in just a minute. First, I'm going to attach the back panel. So I'm going to lay my back panel right side up, and then I'm going to take my gusset and lay my gusset right side down, working on the opposite side this time. Once again, we're going to go midpoint to midpoint and line those up. And then we're going to go corner to corner and clip those together. And I'm going to flip this over so I'm looking at the back of the back panel. And I'm going to focus on the straight edges on the sides and the bottom first. And then I'm going to go and just make little cuts into the seam, no more than 1/4 of an inch deep. And then I'm just going to push that main panel corner in. And I'm going to spread out the gusset. So I don't know if you can see, but you see how those slits allow it to spread around that corner so you don't have the bunching. So now once again, I'm going to flip this over so I'm looking at the back of the gusset panel, and I'm going to stitch around the sides and the bottom at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end, cutting into the corners as I go if I need to, using a stiletto and a zipper foot to help. Okay, once we have that done, if you did a second row of stitching on the first panel, do it on the second panel as well. But now that I have that done, I'm going to go down about 1 inch from the top corner, and I'm going to cut into the seam allowance halfway, so I'm about 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to carefully cut the seam allowance in half all the way around the side and the bottom until I get about 1 inch away from the top, and I'm just eyeballing it. I'm not actually measuring anything. And then I'm going to once again just cut perpendicular into the seam allowance. So I'm keeping the seam allowance at 1/2 of an inch on the top because it's going to help me later, but everywhere else I'm cutting it in half. So I'm going to do this for the other side as well. And then, especially if you have a stiff material, you're going to want to cut little notches or use a pinking shear to go around the corner here. I think I'll be okay. I don't actually think I'll have a problem, because the reason you would do that is because the main panels are not allowing the curve to go. but I think I'm actually going to be fine without cutting into it. So I'm just gonna leave it alone. Okay, you can set this to the side. So now we're gonna pretty much repeat that with the lining, but we do need to leave a hole in the lining. So let's make sure everything has midpoint marks. Midpoint marks on the top and the bottom of each main lining panel and along the base of the gusset. So start with the lining panel that has the mesh pocket and lay the mesh pocket right side up and lay your gusset right side down, midpoint to midpoint, and clip together. And then just like we did on the exterior, we're going to clip corner to corner together. And again, just like on the exterior, flip it over and clip these right sides together and cut into the gusset around the corners to help it spread. Now remember, on the lining, these corners are not noticeable at all. So if they have a little bit of pleating, a little bit of wrinkles, it's totally fine. You're never gonna notice. So once you have this all clipped together, we're gonna take this to the sewing machine with the gusset wrong side up, lining panel right side up. And we're gonna sew along the sides and the bottom. And we're gonna start at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but then once you go around the corner and the bottom, increase it to a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And then once you get towards the top on the other side, decrease it back to a 1/2 inch. So remember, 1/2 inch seam allowance on the top, 5/8 inch on the bottom. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have one side done, now we're gonna repeat the same on the other side. However, on this one, the one with the zipper, we wanna leave an opening on the bottom. So I'm gonna lay my lining panel with zipper right side up, and then take my lining gusset and lay it right side down. And you can again line up midpoint to midpoint on the bottom edge, and then corner to corner on the top. And then just go around the sides and the corners like you did previously. Okay, before we sew this, flip this over so you're looking at the back side of the gusset and we're looking along the clipped edge here. And I'm going to mark about a 5-inch opening. So I'm just going to center it and I'm marking it on the gusset panel. Bigger if you're doing the large, bigger if you're using really thick vinyl. If you're using heavyweight material, you want a bigger opening so you don't rip it. 5 inches should be fine for me. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine, and once again, we're gonna sew along the sides, and we're not gonna sew along the bottom though. So starting at the top, we're gonna sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, increase it to 5/8 of an inch. Once I get to that first mark, I'm gonna back stitch well, lift up my needle, jump over that opening on the bottom, go back to the next mark, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching all the way up to the top and ending at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Just like we did on the other side, just don't sew in the middle of those 2 marks on the bottom. All right, once you've got all that sewn up and you got your hole in the center there, we can trim down these seam allowances again. Once again, I'm gonna leave the 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top for about 1 inch or so, but the rest of it, I'm just gonna trim it down to about 1/4 inch. So I'm trimming down the side right now that does not have the hole on the bottom. But when I focus on the seam that does have the hole in the bottom, I'm not going to trim the seam allowance down at that hole. So I'm gonna go up to the mark, I'm gonna go up to where my stitching ends, and then I'm going to cut off that excess seam allowance. You wanna keep the seam allowance nice and long where this hole is because it's gonna make it a lot easier to close it up in the end. So just go around it and then cut back into the seam allowance wherever you have stitching, except for the top. leave a little bit of that at the top. Okay, take the lining and flip this right side out. So now we want to attach the zipper panel to the exterior. Pay attention for this, because I've made multiple mistakes doing this. First thing, we need to find the midpoint marks on our zipper panel. So just fold this in half. Doesn't matter if it's right sides or wrong sides together. I'm gonna use scissors and I'm cutting along the raw edge of those zipper panels to mark the midpoint. Probably already have marks too from when we did this earlier. This is easier for me to see. So now I'm going to take my exterior that's all sewn together and I'm looking at the front panel. So the front panel is what, if I pull this back right side up, that's the front panel. Then I'm gonna take my zipper gusset and I'm gonna lay my zipper gusset right side down with the zipper closing towards the left. So when it's fully closed, the zipper pulls on the left, and I'm going to line up the midpoint on my zipper gusset with the midpoint on the top edge of my front panel. And again, the zipper and the main panel are right sides together. Okay, right sides together. And then you're just gonna kind of open up the bag and then just clip this zipper panel along the edge. It's going to come close to the seam over here on the side by the gusset, but it's not going to touch it. It's just gonna be like 1/4 inch away from it. So do this on both sides. You're gonna have to kind of twist around your bag a little bit And now we're gonna baste only along this one clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold the zipper panel in place. So now open up your zipper all the way. And then we're gonna repeat on the other side. You're gonna tuck this in, zipper panel, right sides together with the back panel this time. Match up the midpoint marks first, and then clip along the edge. And you're gonna have to kind of twist the bag to get it exactly where you want it. And that should be fine. Again, it just depends on the material you're using. If your material is really thick and stiff, it's gonna be a little bit harder to twist it around. All right, once you have that clip, take this to the sewing machine and baste along that zipper panel at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now once you have that basted, just double check that it does close, it's not twisted, and that it is right side down, not right side up. Okay, now we're gonna tuck in the zipper ends. So fold them inside the bag. You might want to open up your zipper all the way, might be easier. Make sure it's all tucked in there, and then push the zipper down so we just have the seam on the top now. And now we're going to take our lining part of our bag and we're going to insert it into the exterior, and I'm going to have the mesh pocket go against the front panel. So I'm just going to push this in, and the zipper pocket goes against the back panel. And then we're going to line it up midpoint to midpoint along this top seam, and the exterior and the lining should be right sides together. And now we're going to go to the top seams. This is why I left them big, because it's easier to spread them open. So I'm going to spread open the lining seam and spread open the exterior seams, and then clip them seams together. Do this on both sides. And then once you have that done, you can just kind of spread between the seam and the midpoint clips, and it should straighten out. So I found I've done all 3 sizes now, and every time they line up perfectly. I don't have any issues with one being too loose or too tight. So now we're going to sew along this top edge here at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew from inside the bag, just kind of keeping it open. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. I do like to use a zipper foot. Do your best to keep those seams open and just take your time. Okay, this is the exciting part. Now we're going to reach in and pull the lining out. And then reach into that hole in your lining and gently pull your exterior through that hole. And then I like to keep the lining out and push my hand in and push out the corners on the front and the back. If you see anything that doesn't look right, you still have time to fix it. It's easy to turn this back wrong side out so you can fix it. All right. That looks so good. So now I'm going to push the lining in, and we're going to pull the zipper gusset up towards the top. And if it helps, you can kind of close your zipper to make sure it all looks right. How stinking cute is that? Oh my gosh, look at that bag. Isn't that so sweet? I love that it's just all scraps too. It's so cute. So now what we want to do is we want to top stitch. And honestly, if you feel like your bag doesn't need it, then you can probably skip this step. Mine does at these corners. So I'm just going to reach into the hole in the lining, and I'm making sure that those seams are spread open. And I'm going to finger press these seams right here because that's where the bulk is. And I'm just going to press them down. It's going to be the only tricky part with top stitching are those seams. Just do your best to get in there, press them into place, and then you can just go around and kind of pull that lining down nice and taut so that you can get that seam on the front and back panel nice and flat. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch along the seam on the top of the front and back panel and the gusset. So we've already top stitched where the zipper is. This is that seam below it. I'm going to wrap this around the arm of my sewing machine. So I'm going to take the table off the sewing machine and then just wrap this around to top stitch it. I am going to use a zipper foot. You could definitely do a 1/4 inch top stitching if that's easier for you. Either 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch. I'm going to start on the seam of one of the gussets, and I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, take a look. Top stitching looks good. It's really not that hard. How pretty is this bag? Oh, it's so nice. Okay, so now we just have to close up the hole in the lining. So pull your lining up and then kind of poke it out. And then I like to just put my fingers in the hole and kind of give it a tug. And the raw edges will just fold down on themselves. So you have a nice clean fold on the top. And just use clips to clip along that edge. And then I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just making sure I'm fully closing that hole in the lining. Once you have that closed, just push in your lining And there you go. And honestly, you can be done at this point if you don't have the hardware, if you don't want to add the snaps on the side, you can definitely just leave it as is, like a little puppy dog. But I'm going to do the snaps. So here's how I'm going to do mine. I'm just taking one of my 1" by 6" rulers and I'm just kind of centering it in the top stitching on my tab. Now, if you want to measure up and center it, you can, but I'm just kind of looking and making sure that this is centered because I have a hole in my ruler for hanging, and I'm just going to use that as placement for my snap. And then once I'm happy with where that is, I'm going to grab my hole punch and I'm going to punch out the hole, and I am punching through the zipper tape. So if you're using a metal zipper, obviously this would not work for you. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold down my tab here. And now I'm going to position it so that the top edge of my zipper tab lines up with the top stitching on the gusset. And then the zipper tab itself is centered on the gusset. And I'm doing this just with my eyeballs. So I'm going to look at that. It looks pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfect. You won't notice if it's a little bit off. And then once I'm happy with it, I'm going to insert my marking tool into that hole that I punched so that I can see it on my gusset. And that's going to help me with placement for the snap. So I'm going to move that zipper tab out of the way. I'm going to press down the lining nice and tight against the gusset because I am going to be punching through the lining. I'm going to insert my hole punch and I'm going to punch a hole out through the lining and the exterior on the gusset, right where that mark is. And that is the placement for my snap. So I'm going to repeat that exactly on the other side. So now I just have to install the hardware. So I'm going to grab my cap and the female part that goes on the tab here. So the cap goes on the outside and the female part goes on the underside. And this is a really tight fit because it's going through that zipper tape, but I find that it still works. And I'm just going to use the die set and the press to press this in place. And I'm going to do the same thing with the cap and the female portion on the other side. Just remember the cap goes on the top where the zipper teeth are, and the female portion goes on the underside so it can snap down. And then I'm going to change out the die set so that I can work on the male portion. And the male portion has like a long post and a short post. The long post goes inside the bag through the lining, through the exterior, and pokes out through the gusset. And then the short post goes over that on the exterior gusset side. And then just line that up and press it down. And repeat for the other side. Okay, there we go. Now, moment of truth. Snap it in place. Oh yeah, that's cool. And then close the zipper. How pretty is this bag? And you can have so much fun with combinations. I mean, you can make it scrappy like I did, or you can be really, really precise, which I did on the large one. Either way, it works out, and it's gorgeous. I hope you guys love making this. This is a fun, quick make, and I think this would be a great gift. You know, considering I used just scraps for this one, it's my favorite bag. Like, it's my favorite one, yeah. I mean, I love the looks of all these, but the material on this is just great. I am obsessed with this pre-quilted bonded nylon. This is just a substance that, if you haven't tried it, I really encourage you to go grab some because it has such great firmness to it. It's like a bonded nylon with a lightweight fusible fleece already attached. You don't have to do any of the mess of attaching it. It just looks really nice. It's easy to keep clean and easy to use vinyl on the sides. I just love it. And then the inside, using that, I think it's like a Luxe Light nylon. I think that's what it's called, Luxe Light. I'll make sure I have it linked down below, the very specific nylon I use inside this bag, because I feel like the firmness of that is just perfect. If I would have used like a bonded nylon, I think it would have been a little bit looser. But this combination, I mean, look at that. No stabilizer and nothing is droopy. It looks so good. I love this bag. So I hope you enjoyed sewing with me today. I hope you have a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.